Deborah Skies from Meraki Consult. I'm here with my partner and co-founder, Sejal Patel. Today, we're celebrating International Men's Day. Meraki is a purpose-driven company. We believe in sponsoring and creating awareness for causes that we believe in, as well as partnering and supporting charities. So today, we have Mark Brooks from the Mankind Initiative, who is the chair and board of trustees of the Mankind Initiative. And it's the first UK charity to support male victims of domestic abuse. Mark, welcome.
Welcome, Deborah.
Hi, Mark. What a great opportunity to speak to you about something that's very important, relevant, and also important and very close to my heart as a mother of an 18-year-old. Now, you've done a lot in terms of raising the profile of this, not only through the Mankind Initiative, your charity, but also as a chair and the lead, I suppose, for International Men's Day here in the UK. So what are the themes for 2020?
Well, thank you. And thank you, Sejal and Deborah, for inviting me here today. And I think it's really important for this topic to be aired, and the fact that your consulting organisation is really taking this seriously. So I'd just like to thank you on behalf of everybody involved in International Men's Day for your support and raising awareness. In terms of the three key themes, the first theme is around supporting the well-being of men and boys in the UK. Secondly, it's about raising funds and awareness for the whole host of charities in this country that support the well-being of men and boys. But also the last theme is around promoting a positive conversation about men, manhood, and also masculinity. So the whole point of the day is to tackle those issues that affect the well-being of men and boys, but also to talk positively about the contribution that they make as individuals, as parents, as sons and brothers and fathers, and also the contribution that they make to society as a whole.
What are organisations like the Mankind Initiative doing to raise awareness?
Well, there's a whole host of organisations who are actually involved. We're expecting by the end of today to be well over 150 organisations across the UK being involved. That's including employers, that's including charities, government departments. Lots of artists are doing things like fundraising events, comedy shows, poetry events, and also a debate in Parliament as well. So it's really important in terms of understanding how big and how important International Men's Day has actually become. Lots of charities are getting involved in terms of actually using it to not only look after the men that they support, but also to raise awareness of what they do. We know organisations like the one I chair on domestic abuse. We've run a conference over the last 2 days on International Men's Day around supporting men who are victims of domestic abuse. But also we know other organisations like the UK Men's Sheds Association, lots of their sheds have been actually promoting the day, contacting their members, because obviously a number of them are actually not able to physically get to the men's sheds because of the lockdown situation that we're in, and also other organisations just using it to reach out to men that they support and raise that awareness. So it's a real collective effort right across the UK. And if you haven't looked at Twitter at the moment, please use hashtag International Men's Day. Go on our website, ukmensday.org.uk, and you'll see a whole host of activity across the UK happening right now.
Excellent. I mean, Mark, I've known you for years, and we've had many a discussion about this subject over coffee. My view, like Sejal, I'm invested because I've got a son as well, a grown son, brothers, uncles, grandfathers. Why is well-being so important to be raised? I mean, this whole, society will deem men to say men don't cry or whatever. But why are you really focusing on promoting well-being for men and boys at this particular time?
Well, I think it's important to promote the well-being of men and boys at two levels. First of all, we can't say in the UK that we're an inclusive society that recognises diversity and also looks after people who need support from whatever background, whatever gender, sexuality, race, etc. We can't say we're a truly diverse country unless we're also looking after, as part of that, the well-being of men and boys, who do, after all, make up half of the population. And there's particular issues that affect men. A number of them affect women as well, but certainly issues around suicide, for example. 3 out of every 4 suicides in the UK are actually men. Boys are behind girls at every stage in education. Nearly all of the people who are homeless and sleeping rough on the streets are actually men. And 12,000 men die a year because of due to prostate cancer. And even on COVID, for example, 60% of the people who have died with the coronavirus are actually men as well. So there's a whole host of well-being issues that we need to tackle as a society to make sure that the well-being of men and boys are actually supported, and there's some particular issues. And the other reason it's really important is because, just leading on from the point I talk about inclusion, is that we all live in a society together. So if there's men and boys who are in trouble, that means that that's affecting women and girls too, not only as mothers and sisters, as partners, work colleagues and friends. So it's really important that as a society we look after the well-being of men and boys, because it affects us all in this exactly the same way that we rightly do and need to look after the well-being of women and girls too.
What can we do more as a society, cultures, and also, thinking about traditions, particular coming from, an Indian background, to promote a more positive conversation about men and boys and masculinity in particular?
Well, I think there's 2 areas, and it's a really good question. And I think there's 2 areas. One is dealing with a negative, if I may. I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the last 5-10 years about toxic masculinity, around issues about the lack of care, and about some of those issues that I talked about that affect men and boys. And what I'm finding over the last 10 years especially is there's been a real antipathy towards men and boys issues, a real kind of lack of empathy. And really, is it that society is not helping men to get help and boys to get support because we're not prepared to actually listen, not prepared to actually invest in public services that support men and boys? And also the fact that there's this negativity about why should we actually bother helping men and boys, and the focus, the political narrative around gender has overwhelmingly been focused on meeting the needs and well-being of women and girls, which of course are really important to do so. But for some reason, there's been a refusal to actually talk about men and boys issues. And you can look at this at a very top level. So, for example, in the government have got a Minister for Women and Equalities. Why is that not women, men and equalities? So you can see at a political level some of the structural problems about getting men in the conversation. And a number of us have been arguing for years now to have a men's health strategy, and that would be a good example of a practical way of dealing with some of those issues.
I mean, it shouldn't even be a gender kind of tagged issue. I mean, we're all humans, right? So it goes both ways, and it's really important, for all genders, right, to ensure that they are supported, in the right way, and by society. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where it isn't something that's tagged as a gender sort of issue, and International Human Day is something that we actually create?
Well, it's an interesting question, actually, because because one of the things, well, firstly, I mean, it should never be a competition for support between women and men. So, and you know, I'll be up front. There's lots of organisations who don't want men and boys' well-being to be part of the gender conversation, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But also, what's interesting is that we've kind of moved away, and I think it's the right way of moving away from being gender neutral, because often if you're gender neutral on certain issues, you end up actually not supporting any gender.
Yeah.
And so therefore having an International Women's Day, which focuses on particular issues that women and girls faced in the UK, is perfectly fine. On the other hand, as long as we have an International Men's Day, which does the same, and that's why people like Mother's Day and people like Father's Day. And what it does is that it gives you a particular focus on those particular issues that affect both genders. The key thing is not to denigrate either day, but also to actively take part, and therefore having the days that particular focus on particular genders really does work, because it focuses everybody's mind on those particular things. And that's why in the domestic abuse field, which I'm more active in, that's why it's really important, for example, that organisations and services are able to focus on women, but also focus on men, because men and women are different in terms of some of the barriers and experiences that they face, not only in domestic abuse, but also more widely. And, you know, I come back to the point that having a men's health strategy focusing on some of those issues around mental health and isolation, for example, would go a long way to actually supporting more men, stopping them taking their own lives. And of course, having a women's health strategy would actually really focus on some of those issues that women and girls face as well. So a gender inclusive approach means actually respecting both men and women, and actually being able to focus on their particular needs. And I think that's where we need to get to in 2020 and over the next decade.
And that's really important, isn't it? I think, you know, and totally with you, having both you know, a son and daughter as well, you know, myself. So what can organisations like Meraki Consult do more of to help you, you know, to raise the profile, to you know, get this movement going?
Well, I think firstly, the fact that you're actually having this conversation today is brilliant, and that again will make a difference, because the more we talk about not only International Men's Day, but more importantly, those issues around men and boys' well-being. In terms of your consultancy work, I think what would be really important is that when you're consulting and talking and working with the organisations that you do and will do in the future, is about when it comes to issues around inclusion and diversity, it is just asking those kind of questions about, you know, is this work going to support the men in your workforce? Is this going to actually support not only their career ambitions or talk about their skills, but also talk about some of the well-being issues that those men will face? And I mean, a good example was I was talking to a NHS hospital trust just the other day, and they were talking about what support that they can give to International Men's Day, and they were talking about having particular campaigns about encouraging men to go into nursing, for example, because there's hardly any men who are nurses, and also to help some of their male employees to actually reach out to any organisations that help with mental health. So it's actually just, when you're working with organisations, just to have an eye and just to look out and have that nuanced, inclusive approach, that means that you just ask those questions or make those points if the situation arises. And that's what I would be looking for from a consultancy like yourselves, that kind of intelligent, inclusive and nuanced approach.
Really good advice, really good advice. And I think you're absolutely right. There has to be a rebalancing in terms of, you know, male and female movements. I also believe it's a huge societal change, and I think it's generational. I think about my father, grandfather, and my upbringing in terms of the way men were portrayed as being tough and not showing any weakness. That hasn't helped men's mental health and well-being by, you know, having to be the tough guy, having to be strong. And I think there are things like that, for example, as a mother, I've sort of reflected on and thought, actually, I should have actually been more fair towards my son as well. And there should have been a rebalancing in how I mother and parent my children as well, male or female. So I think it's generational. And I think probably, hopefully, the next generation will have a better stab at doing this, but we are still contributing and raising awareness of it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the way, for example, you were brought up, Mark? And do you have any observation?
That's the question. Certainly in terms of when I was growing up, the kind of masculinity behaviours of being courageous, brave, provider and protector were very, very much to the fore. And to be honest, it's one of these things about a whole discussion about masculinity and behaviours, because as a society, we actually need those behaviours, and also men and women actually exhibit them to various degrees. I mean, it's, you know, brave and courageous that both of you have set up this consultancy, and so the issue is about how far you take those behaviours, and how and that's the discussion. And I think where we've got to, certainly in society I was growing up, those behaviours were not only absolutes just for men, and weren't behaviours for men and women, but they were kind of at the wrong end of the spectrum. And I think where we're getting to now is that the recognition that those behaviours are still needed, but they should be closer to the middle and not at the end of those spectrum, about how people actually experience those behaviours, or actually complicit in those behaviours. So it's about getting the balance right. And, you know, one of the things I talk about with the narrative, and we've heard a bit more over the last few days around toxic masculinity. And, you know, I have to say that's probably the most dangerous term I've heard in the last 5 years, because it's moved away from being something about the behaviours which are associated with being men. Actually, men themselves are toxic. And one of the things I've always said is that, you know, if you're a man who's vulnerable, if you're being told that being a man and also your behaviours that you have are toxic, you're hardly going to reach out and get support. And also, I think it's a cop-out for a society and organisations not to actually care about men, because why should we care? Because they're toxic, in inverted commas. Yeah. So I think about we're moving away from the kind of behaviours being on that spectrum from when I'm growing up. But then on the other hand, we've got a movement that's actually trying to make masculine behaviours seen as being toxic, and actually men themselves being toxic. And so that's really dangerous. And so there's still this battle going on. Yeah. But the last point I would say is that about getting men to speak, it's really important that more men do come forward, and more men are. Certainly we've seen an increase in the course of our helpline. I know in the domestic abuse helpline, I know other organisations seen an increase. The key thing is that there's no point getting men to talk if there's not organisations and people available or prepared to listen. So the key thing is about getting more men to talk, but as a society and as individuals and organisations and in the statutory sector, we need more people to be able to listen to those men when they do come forward. Excellent.
Thank you, Mark. And we really need to keep this discussion dialogue going. So we'll provide some information about the Mankind Initiative and the UK Men's International Day as well. do feel free to email Mark in terms of finding out more. And also, if you want to talk about anything to do with consulting around inclusive behaviours and work, give us a call too. Our details will be at the end of the actual clip. Mark, thank you so much. All right, it was we could talk forever to you. Thank you so much.
That's
Thanks,
okay.
Mark.
That's okay. And just as a reminder, go on Twitter, #International Men's Day. Post your messages about how wonderful all the men and boys are in your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right.